Hey, Teresa. Hi, Diana.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. Just trying to stay warm. Are you?
Yeah, same.
Hi, Teresa. It's always a pleasure to see you guys.
Likewise.
Are you doing well, Monica?
Oh, yeah, I'm good. How about you?
Good, good. If you're speaking to us, Teresa, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I said I couldn't hear you very well because I had a space heater on. I just turned it off, and I said it was an interesting meeting yesterday for the listening session.
Oh, I thought so too.
I had to leave at 1 for a food council meeting for my county. Did much happen go on beyond that?
No, no. I thought the most interesting part of the meeting was the beginning.
Okay, good.
What did you think, Monica? I saw that you were on too.
I was more listening than anything, but I guess I'm a little confused about what's going to happen next for the food policy networks. Like, they're branching off to their own nonprofit. Is that right?
That's
Or
what it
something like
sounds
that?
like. First of all, I don't know how I got invited. And then second, I didn't know. I walked away with thinking, well, what was the purpose of this?
I thought they were gathering data for CLF.
Maybe I should follow up with Anne on
Yeah,
all of
because
that.
I thought the CLF was thinking or needing to go in a different direction, but they didn't want to just drop the food policy network. So they're gathering data to see what is the most important points that people would like. So maybe they can continue and address some of the biggest needs. That's what I was thinking, but I don't know.
See, Teresa, you walked away with more than I did.
Well, I mean, I guess from the original email when they were asking us to participate in it, I think that's where I got that impression, was from the original email they sent saying, if you would like to participate for the region, and they were only taking a certain number. And I just think the work that they've done, our food council wouldn't be here without of the work that they've done. So I was like, yeah, I want to go on and say how important I think it is that there's a food policy network to support the work of food councils.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it is interesting to hear what's going on, like, outside of Maryland too, with other food councils. Although I thought yesterday's was supposed to be Mid-Atlantic focused, Teresa, and then we ended up speaking with the person from the New Hampshire Food Council. So that was interesting too.
Yeah, it was kind of East Coast, I guess.
Yeah. We'll just give it one more minute while people are joining.
Okay.
And Nancy, you were there too. We're talking about the meeting yesterday.
I was. It was interesting. It's always nice.
That's exactly what we just said, Nancy.
It's always nice to meet and hear people from other areas, other perspectives.
Well, I think that it's just so critical to have some governing body like the food policy networks, and if that is diminishing in its role or going away, I hope there will be somebody to pick that work up.
I agree.
Should we go ahead and get started?
Yes.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining the Distribution and Access Committee meeting today. My name is Annika LaFaith. I am the Food Systems Resilience Coordinator with the Maryland Department of Emergency Management. And before I forget to say it, this call is being recorded and will be posted to the council's website as soon as possible. We have these meetings recorded and post meeting minutes as well in compliance with the Open Meetings Act, but want to encourage public participation as much as possible. Today is really going to be more of like a working meeting, trying to set the tone for the spring for this committee and thinking about what the priorities are for the 2025 annual report recommendations that the committee will be working on over the next few months. But before I get too into the weeds, I wanted to turn it over to the committee co-chairs to introduce themselves and welcome everyone. And I always forget, please go ahead and put your name and organization in the chat for our records so we know who's here.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just as I echo what Annika just said, welcome. And I really look forward to this meeting and seeing that we can all come together on one accord and accomplish some great things.
Great. Thanks, Diana. Hello, everyone. I'm Meg Kimmel. I echo Diana's welcome. Thank you for being here. Really excited about the chance to really start to bring all the learnings that we've been going through and experiencing together toward a recommendations report. So a big shout out and thank you to Annika for helping make all that possible. And we're looking forward to today's conversation.
Great, thank you both. So just a few quick announcements. The next full council meeting is coming up on February 6th. That is going to be a meeting that's mostly focused on the annual ethics training that the council members have to do. But we're also going to hear from Secretary Addix from the Maryland Department of Agriculture on the new Leaders in Environmentally Engaged Farming program that MDA is working on. Environment and Production is meeting on February 13th, and the next Distribution and Access Committee meeting is officially going to be on February 27th. The Communication and Coordination Committee is also meeting every week during the legislative session. If you have not been able to join so far, I recommend checking it out one of these weeks just to see what the conversations are looking like and learn more about food systems legislation at the state level. I'm going to share in the chat before I forget the FSRC's legislation tracker that we have for state legislation, and that's a public resource for anyone to bookmark and use as you'd like. So that is there in the chat for you. Okay, so today, as I said, is mostly going to be about the annual report and really hearing from you all what you want to be working on as a committee. I want to be clear that we want to hear participation from everyone who's participating in these committee meetings, not just people who are officially appointed to the FSRC. We really care about the voices of all of our community partners, and so please don't hesitate to chime in. The annual report timeline got bumped up a little bit this year because we are hoping to get some official feedback from state agencies earlier on in the recommendations process. And so what that means is that committees are hopefully going to have draft recommendations, not final drafts, but a first draft recommendation ready to be shared with those state agencies by the end of April. And from there, MDEM is going to facilitate getting that feedback from the state agencies over a couple weeks and return it to you all to review and incorporate how you would like to. And for those who may not remember or haven't done this before, the committee will then vote together, the voting members only will vote to decide which of the recommendations will be submitted for the final report and be reviewed by the full FSRC membership. Does anyone have any questions about this timeline? It's a lot of steps and details to wrap your head around, especially if it's your first time. So feel free to reach out if you have questions about it at a later time. I just wanted to kind of reflect on what the topics have been for you all as a committee over the past few months since the 2024 annual report was published. I spoke with Meg and Diana last week about other things that they think would be important for you all to discuss as a committee for the recommendations. And so, before I forget, we do have these recommendations criteria checklists, and a template out for a vote right now with the full council. We're waiting to see if the council wants to adopt these documents, and that will be finalized on the 31st of January. But really, these were documents that we created with the help of the FSRC leadership as a way of helping to streamline the recommendations process and strengthening the quality of those recommendations, and hopefully serve as a helpful tool for you all as you are drafting them over the next few months. Any questions about the criteria or the template from the council members? We'll share it publicly too, with everybody who is participating in the drafting process once we have hopefully a positive decision on that. Okay, let me see. Go ahead,
Annika,
Meg.
I was just going to add, just channeling you for a minute. If anyone is an appointed member on the council and you haven't yet voted on these tools, please do. We can't use them if they're not formally approved by the council, and we really want to. They're amazing. So just putting that ask out there. You haven't already done it.
Thanks, Meg. Appreciate that. So we have these recommendation topics that we were hoping really to have an in-depth conversation with you all about, and hear where there is interest in participating in writing recommendations or not. So this is the list that we came up with that I'm going to turn it over to you in a moment to weigh in on. Expanding food access through farmers markets and CSA programs, expanding food access through community gardens, the community eligibility provision and universal school meals, food date labeling and consumer education, and food as medicine policies and programs. I think this is an exciting list because this is very new for this committee. I think all of these topics are things that you have not really gotten into past recommendations, aside from maybe the farmers markets one. Mike, did you have a question?
Just wanted to sort of ask about a hole that I think there is in this, and that is, do any of these include year-round access, year-round distribution? Because otherwise, if it's just focused on fresh food, it's really limited to the growing season, isn't it?
Heather Holsey has helpfully commented in the chat that farmers markets are open year-round.
Yeah, they're open year-round, but do they have year-round, the products available year-round? Again, my head's thinking about the pending processing facility on the Eastern Shore that's also going to include an IQF system in order to freeze products, so it's available year-round. Should that be part of the conversation, or is that different?
Like, I never heard of an IQF system, and what does that stand for? IQF?
I'm sorry, instant quick freezing. In other words, the product will be washed, cut, bagged, and frozen.
Okay.
And I would say, oh, I'm sorry, did someone have their hand up? I just started talking. This is the kind of conversation we want to have here today, Mike. So thank you for getting us started. One of the things that we're just thinking about year round, because that is obviously something that we think about a lot at the food bank. And so these recommendations this initial starter list of recommendations that we're putting out there is also built on the shoulders of recommendations that we've put forth in previous years. So for example, we've spent a lot of time recommending the creation and support of food policy councils, which are local entities that are designed to support charitable food assistance. So that's something we've kind of put that out there a couple times. We think that's pretty clear. So this is a build, and we're trying to think about where are there gaps still in the food system, and where are there things that we haven't yet weighed in on. So that's a little bit about how we got to this list. But again, I agree I'd love to talk about the production capacity. And there's lots of people on here there's the M-Farm legislation that passed that's got modest funding. But yeah, I think talking about production capacity is something I'm interested in. I just don't know if is that, Annika, you can answer this. Is that something that environment and production, is already
Meg, before we
Digging
go,
into.
Annika, I see you have your hand up. But Meg, what I was thinking is that it could go under, if whoever's in that work group could talk about it more in expanding food access for farmers market and CSA programs. And that's all I want to say. Go ahead, Annika.
Well, so I was going to say, building off of Mike's question, where we're going with this is we are going to send out a form for people to sign up to participate in work groups to work on these recommendations. And we really hope that these topics will evolve from just like this headline here. But I'm going to go ahead and put it in the chat now for those who want to take a look. It's coming again later in this presentation. But we have highlighted 3 of the recommendations from past reports, including the expansion of the cold storage network. And I feel like what you're referring to, Mike, actually ties in well to revisiting that recommendation from the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. Teresa.
And I have a question. Since I feel that we had put out that information, that recommendation about the food councils, and we have Annika and your department now, and then we have under the coordination and collaboration subcommittee, the food policy networks. But I guess I'm just feeling a little bit concerned to not have anything about that this time, just because CLF's food policy network might be not as available or putting as much time in. And then with what happened at Montgomery County Food Council, Anne Marie, you know, hearing about Michelle's position and Jack's position. So I feel like we still have to champion that.
So I've just switched screens. It's less pretty than the presentation, but just so you can see, these are the 3 recommendations that Meg and Diana highlighted as feeling necessary to revisit today. And so expanding capacity for local food policy councils is definitely still there. And it's, as many of you know, one of the top goals that the council has been assigned by the statute. I'm glad you said that, Teresa.
Well, thank you.
Other thoughts on this list of new topics? What else do people feel like should be added? Or is there anything that feels like it's not a priority right now? Anne Marie, go ahead.
Hi, yeah. I guess I would say one thing, and I know I already connected you all with him, but Ben Marcus from the USDA Food and Nutrition Services looking to connect on increasing access to kosher and halal foods through federal nutrition programs. And I would, since I know he wasn't able to join today, and I know it's a really big concern in Montgomery County. Our Office of Food Systems Resilience had a joint meeting with some staff from USDA a month or so ago, and it was noted that we are the most religiously diverse county in the state. And so those, really are just a concern, especially for students accessing meals in the school lunch program, but also for our food assistance providers.
Thank you for sharing that, Anne Marie. Any other thoughts on that topic? Maybe talking about accessibility of culturally appropriate foods in Maryland.
Could that go under the community eligibility provision and universal school meals and availability, access to culturally appropriate foods?
Heather says it can be under every category. So since Teresa brought up community eligibility provision and universal school meals, I guess I'll tap on that one and see if anyone has any ideas around specific strategies for a recommendation at this time. Interestingly, that one is named in the statute as something that the FSRC is supposed to address. And as far as I know, there are no bills this session thus far that have to do with universal school meals, unless I'm mistaken.
I haven't seen any.
Yeah.
I think because it's such a big tag put on it, of what it would cost for the state to do. But I guess probably the other thing we could have under that though too is summer meals through the USDA program too. Because that's, I mean, like we did 110,000 summer meals last summer in just Caroline County. So
Yeah, that's a really interesting idea, Beth. Can you keep talking that out a little bit? How would a USDA funded program, like what would our recommendation be to the General Assembly around that?
I don't know. See, that's the hard one. Like, so you can utilize, if it has to be a priority funding area that you can go into to get summer meals. I don't know, Meg, like, is it having access to governmental offices to be able to partner with vendors to hand out the meals? But you have to have a 40% free and reduced in that area to be able to give out meals. So rural America can now give out meals without it's non-congregate, so the kids don't have to sit and us watch them eat and then go to the next stop. I mean, basically now Caroline's all rural, that we can go down the street and hand a kid a meal as long as they're 18 and younger. So I don't know if maybe it's having safe places for them to get meals like that. That's, you know, and that's what a lot of the urban people are saying is, you know what, it's not really that safe for our kids, and they're in food desert areas to go, you know, sit in a park and necessarily eat a meal because the environment's not safe. So I don't know, putting it into, I never know how to put it into legislation, to be quite honest.
Yeah, which is absolutely fine. I mean, that's why we have this this next phase of the work, is to form work groups to look into the specifics of, you know, of exactly what an ask might be to the General Assembly. And I think summer meals is a really potent topic, because we haven't really talked about, and I might just throw this out there now, and Annika and Diana, you can take it from there, but we did have a lot of conversations along the way about the budget reality of the state of Maryland, and wanting, and Nancy, maybe you're the person to speak to this, but wanting to make sure that as we're putting recommendations forth, that we're acknowledging that it's a really difficult budget environment, that we're not asking for things that we think are pie in the sky that have no chance of getting funded, that we're trying to be smart with our asks. And so, you know, that to me, like that waterfall kind of lines up with, you know, universal school meals is a huge fiscal note. Maybe a smart play is summer, and maybe there's some ideas that we can put forth, that we can ask for designated spaces in, you know, county civic centers, or like something to take it and make it into, we can move the work forward without it being really, really costly, but we're still moving the work forward. So I mean, I like where you're going with that, Beth.
I think when we were talking about that, when we had the meeting, we thought about community universal school meals being under the blueprint and asking why could not that not be added to the blueprint. And I also think that that's where summer lunches could maybe fall also.
I mean, for instance, when we were, before we had the non-congregate for rural area, we had one township that did not qualify for summer meals because they were below that 40% free and reduced. And I had two of my poorest neighborhoods in that vicinity that I couldn't serve, that USDA wouldn't give us the funding to be able to serve them. Silly.
But I think it's a good conversation, and I think it would be a very a conversation to take to the work group to be broken down a little further, because it's a need, and it definitely, I think, should be something we should discuss.
And to that note too, Diana, as we discussed last week, we can definitely reach out to the subject matter experts we've already had join this committee to see if they can help weigh in at the work group level too, and help craft like where this recommendation would go in the earlier stage. Emily?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So I'll just kind of jump in here too. Hopefully it's appropriate for me to say this, but so from Department of Human Services, so most of you probably are aware, we launched our Summer Sunbucks program this past summer, and we issued $120 to eligible children across the state for that program, which were additional SNAP benefits. And just along the line of the community eligibility provisions, so part of the federal regs is that we have CEP schools that get free and reduced meals, right, through their school. But those children actually have to apply for Sunbucks. So unlike when we did our PEBT, we did our pandemic benefits, all children, even in CEP schools, received that benefit because they were technically free and reduced eligible. Right. So I don't know, and maybe I hope I'm not out, stepping outside of my lane here, but as a committee, I'm wondering if that's also not an area that we could potentially, now it's more of, federal, but it also, I don't know. I don't know if there's somewhere that we could go to encourage for that program to include those CEP children. So I just, as a direct certification. So I'm just kind of putting that out there right now. It's more from a federal perspective, but I don't know. I mean, with state budget issues that we're having right now, we do have programs sometimes where the state can take on the offset of that, but I think this is more from a federal. But I don't know if there's a push that we can, take to our legislators that maybe could push to the federal level for that program. So just kind of throwing that out. We also, because we are the administering agency for the Sunbucks program, we do partner very closely with MSDE. And so they do a lot of the school meals. And so there's a coordination plan that we are going to be required to develop in coordination with MSDE to kind of align our Sunbucks program with the school meals. And so we have until January of next year to do that. But I don't know where I may be able to help, but I just kind of wanted to throw that out there because I think there is a lot of opportunity with alignment and kind of where Beth was going with looking at that. So just wanted to share.
Any other thoughts on CEP or universal school meals? It sounds like it will be a work group and there might be opportunities to tie it into other programs too, like Sunbucks. Should we talk about community gardens, expanding food access through community gardens? And interestingly, Diana, after we spoke about it at the Future Harvest Conference, I definitely heard people talking about community gardens and public land access for addressing food insecurity in the state.
Teresa, I see you with your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Would that include aquaponics or hydroponics?
I think that's again something that would be discussed in the work group, and it definitely could from my perspective.
We're having some exciting work done in the schools in Allegheny County with aquaponics and hydroponics. And so I definitely think it could be included.
Would that fall into like consumer education about like growing food, Teresa, and like community gardens in that capacity?
Well, I'm just thinking like we have some schools that have both outdoor greenhouses, raised beds, and hydroponic towers and aquaponics. So to me, they're just all different avenues of community gardening. Or, you know, it's through a school, but then like in one community, it's through a church. So we have like the hospital has some community beds. So the individual communities have some raised beds. Then the schools are doing this aquaponics, and part of 4-H through University of Maryland Extension work in the schools with these hydroponics and aquaponics. If you're interested, one of the schools, Bishop Walsh, which is a private school in Allegheny County, was just featured on Maryland Farm and Harvest a couple months ago for their hydroponics, aquaponics, and outdoor greenhouse. So I think that would be, and they are one of the newly formed 4-H programs, and they're helping other schools in the county, public schools, to do hydroponics as well. So it was, we had our meeting yesterday, our county work group meeting for Western Maryland Food Council, and just a very inspiring conversation. And someone from USDA saw the program and recommended that the STEM educator in charge of that program at Bishop Walsh apply for some funding through USDA. And I can tell you what that was. So they're getting ready to work on that. It's the Urban Ag and Innovative Production Grant to take some buildings in the community and dedicate those to hydroponics or aquaponics. So it's a different, when we think of community gardens, I'm used to thinking of raised bed gardening, but since this is happening and it's so exciting, and that does provide year round. So they're providing lettuce to the school for their cafeteria. They're providing to the Union Rescue Mission, which is a homeless shelter and feeding program. And now they're providing to the community cafe, which is a pay-as-you-can restaurant. So I just hope it would be included in that community gardens recommendation.
Nancy, were you going to say something?
Actually, I just typed it. I guess my main question was how community gardens is being defined. And I imagine the work group will work on that, but it can be a term that means so many things to so many people that I think we have to be mindful of that. And as Teresa said, you know, I think the work group will have to determine whether they want to be all inclusive or a specific type of community garden.
Meg?
Hi, this is Lisa. I'm on the phone, Lisa Lackemeyer, and I just had one question that just popped up. I know Nancy Nunn and I had done some work on this prior, which is somewhat related to community gardens, but a little bit different. But when we're just mentioning schools and gardens and cafeterias, that's actually come up a lot, that some school districts won't allow garden produce in the cafeterias and others will. And I do think that's a potential legislative topic, is looking at, the rules or regulations in regards to produce grown either in school gardens or community gardens, and what the rules are related to that. Because and Nancy probably has those documents. But the ag law had done some work pulling up some regulations related to that a year or two ago. But that's often a barrier in regards to school cafeterias serving it. So that is just a potential legislative that wouldn't have any dollar value associated with it.
That's great. Thank you. That's really, really a good call out, Lisa. Aligns with what I was going to say, which was, we're looking at the first two bullets, as you can see, start with expanding food access, right? So to Nancy, to your question about how to define a community garden, I think the only thing that would be important to keep consistent on is that it expands food access, and knowing the legislation, right, that to help address food insecurity, right? So you want the food to go to people who need access to good quality fresh foods. And so beyond that, the definition of what the gardens are themselves, I think will take a lot of forms. I agree that would happen at the work group level. But that's one of the things that that phrase is in there very intentionally, because we're really mining the legislation to try to make sure that our recommendations are responding to what the legislation is asking for. So just trying to think of some ways to create some responses to gaps in the food system. And community gardens are so localized, and they can be so customized, and the food can be chosen by and for community, and all kinds of things that we've talked about. So, but I love the alignment with kind of how do we pull in all the activity that's already happening, and encourage and incent and ideally support more of that.
Absolutely.
Good conversation.
Very good conversation. Shannon?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out one of the reasons that there are no allowances for certain servings within the school cafeterias is each of the counties has their own potential zoning or ordinances. And so when it comes to community gardening and whether or not that's an accessible or a useful opportunity, sometimes that boils down to not a state legislature, but a local zoning or a local planning issue. So just wanted to point that out.
Thank you, Shannon.
Any other thoughts on this topic? I'm glad, Lisa, that you're here too by phone, because I was thinking about it would be great to have somebody from Extension here, and thinking about the many programs Extension has that relate to this topic, including from the Master Gardeners.
Sorry I'm by phone, and
No.
yeah, sorry I'm by phone, but I'm in a parking lot right now, so that's just.
Okay, let's talk food date labels. So this is something that this committee discussed early in December. And I will share that it is a topic that Environment and Production also plans to have a work group focused on, but more from the wasted food perspective. And I think that this group is more interested in tackling the consumer education side of things with food date labels. But together, I think that would create a really strong recommendation duo or joint recommendation. Thoughts on that one? Interest from people in the committee for that one?
I mean, I can add a couple thoughts. I've been socializing this idea a little bit around with some colleagues here at the food bank and other places. And this is something that so many people are quick to say, oh my gosh, can we do this better? There has to be a better way. It can't be as complicated as it is today. And for those of you who weren't at the session that we had, it was pointed out to us that California has just passed legislation and I think they went to 2 designations. One is, oh, help me get this right. One is used by, and one is, I can't remember. They went from 4 designations to 2, and and the idea of simplifying it for consumers, so there's not so much wasted food, which means there's more food available to be distributed out through the charitable food system. And it's just a win-win, and we have a nice precedent to follow in the California process. So I'm validating that this is something that people who work in this space are eager for. And there is a piece of last thing I'll say. I just saw there's a Senate bill around milk produced in Maryland and dating of that milk that doesn't mention FSRC, and so our team here is looking at that to see if there's a way to align that idea with potentially with this work that we're going to be doing to make a recommendation on date labeling and consumer education. Yeah, what did you say? It was sell by.
Sell by.
Perfect. Thank you.
Stephanie?
Yeah, I would just add that I don't think there needs to be 2 committees on this. I think if there are interested people working on this, they should work together with the people interested in environment and production. As I think I think we're all working towards the same thing, looking at California, looking at other states. What are their legislation around that, and how can we have something that helps with Maryland's food, not wasted food and having it donated. So I think would be great to do it together.
Stephanie, I was thinking the exact same thing. Thank you.
I think that's great. This is Lisa again. I also think just from I think the California legislation is really important. I also think in regards to any of the terminology or any messaging out, there's a lot of experience with the Center for Health Literacy at the University of Maryland in regards to that. So that's just kind of another resource, that kind of consumer messaging piece of it in regards to the plain language piece of it.
Oh, sorry, I just gave you a thumbs up, Lisa. I forgot you can't see that. Thank you for that.
Yeah. No problem.
So Annika, would it be difficult to combine the 2 groups to work on that? Food date labeling and consumer education?
So we're, I think, just a little bit ahead with environment and production, looking to set up a meeting for the next couple of weeks, but there's no reason that I can't share that date with anyone who's interested from distribution and access. So if there is interest, if anyone, or especially now, if you know that you want to participate in that discussion, if you can let me know now or by email today or tomorrow, that would be great, and I can loop you in on their when to meet poll. And sorry, I put in the wrong link for the bill that Meg was talking about, but it's House Bill 8, food and milk product labeling. Any other thoughts on food date labels before we get to food as medicine? Okay, let's talk food as medicine. Casey Dyson had to leave, but she said that she was in favor of having that be a recommendation. But I think that based on my conversation, if I'm remembering correctly with Diana and Meg last week, I think for this one, there are many topics or directions that you could take food as medicine in, and what makes the most sense for this committee and this time to address. Baltimore City just sent out last week a study that they did with Center for a Livable Future on the 1115 waivers.
I think this is an important topic that we need to explore some more. And as I was sitting here, I was thinking about Medicaid waiver. I know I've been hearing a lot that a lot of programs have been going for food as medicine has been going under the Medicaid waiver, and insurance companies have been buying into this also. But I don't know. That's all I know.
And it's okay too if this feels like a topic that the committee wants more time with and maybe isn't something that you guys are ready to address for the 2025 report too. Or if the work group is really inspired by this topic and wants to do that research.
I mean, that's kind of where my head was going, Annika, because it's going to take research. It's going to take time to get our heads into this, to think about what we have, what other states are doing, how it might show up in Maryland in a tough budget environment. Like, I think it's going to be thoughtful work. And so if we don't spend some time digging into it now, whether it makes it into the report or not is not really, I don't think we need to answer that question, but to start the process of really getting more knowledgeable about this and developing expertise, because we do have this resource from Baltimore City, which is great. There's other organizations out there that are paying attention to this topic. So there is a table to convene around potential subject matter experts or people who are, interested in learning more. So I would advocate for starting now and then just not being too focused on making it into the report. If we have something great, if we don't, that's also great.
I agree, Meg. And I was going to say the exact same thing. So thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah, I was just going to say something similar. So I think that, I was going to ask actually if there was anyone who really knew what was going on in the other states, but, it sounds like that's the research that needs to be done. And I think this group would be, I think we need to do it. So.
This is Lisa. I'd be really curious. I'd be really curious, as Lisa, the legislative asks that other states have done. Like, I feel like I've heard a lot about programs, but I'd be curious how they've leveraged state dollars or policies at the state level for it. So I think that would be I'm not sure what we'd be asking in the legislation in regards to this at this point.
Nancy.
So to go back to one of Meg's original comments, I think the other thing regarding the proposed recommendations and maybe possible proposed recommendations to think about is the budget, and what do we also want to suggest or put our weight behind what we don't want to see cut that is currently in place. I mean, that was one thing that became very clear in our earlier conversation. So, we might want to open the floor to what programs we want to think about that way.
Thank you, Nancy. I think that's a very important topic that we really need to talk about, because I can foresee, or I'm thinking that we are going to experience some cuts. What they may be, I'm not sure, but I'm thinking right off my top of my head, I think SNAP, WIC, maybe a couple of programs that may receive a hit.
Do you want to take some time to talk about the revisiting the other recommendations from 2024? Or should we get into work groups? What makes the most sense for time now?
Well, because we want to be, at what time is it? It's fine. Because we want to really see where we ask for dollars in 2024. Can we just go over them real quickly or just refresh our memory?
Yeah. So in 2024, you had these three recommendations from goal number 1, establish and maintain a statewide charitable food locator service, establish and maintain a statewide food insecurity map, which is still part of your statute, and strengthening the emergency food assistance program. And so the food insecurity map is something that I think that the committee is still interested in pursuing, and the council is still interested in pursuing, but it's not really clear what the evolved strategy would be, especially if funding is a barrier. Maybe others have more to add to that or disagree with my summary.
Annika, on the mapping, I feel like there's like so many of us. I mean, I've done a lot of mapping work. Meg has done, the Johns Hopkins. I feel like a lot of us have done maps, but it's like getting something that's kind of, that brings everything all together. And again, usually things need funding, but I'm wondering if they're like, I just feel like there's a lot of maps out there, and how do we bring together the different institutions that have done this mapping effort to have something that's like actually the focus is statewide and it meets the legislation.
Nancy?
So Stephanie, I think you hit the nail right on the head, and that's sort of what we had talked about in a meeting. I will say that we were invited to present on this particular recommendation of all the recommendations to the General Assembly's subcommittee on the joint subcommittee on program open space, which I thought was really interesting. And I know that, as this says about a holistic view, all of the state agencies are really being tasked to look at what they do holistically. So I think there's a real interest in having this map available as a piece of the state's sort of overall picture. But the real question for this work group would be, how do we propose breaking this particular recommendation into bite-sized pieces? Like Stephanie, you said you have a piece of it, others have a piece of it. I know Meg, the food bank really owns a large piece of it. And so how do we bring all of those pieces together, and then maybe the next step of creating the dashboard and having it maintained? I mean, are there chunks of it? And there might be work that students can do to actually just ensure that all the pieces are put together. So that would be my suggestion, to really look at this again and how do we make it happen? But I do think there is state interest in it.
Anne Marie and then Summer.
Yeah, two things. One, I'll just share as someone locally who is doing that in Montgomery County. We do have a map, and then our county itself also operates a distribution calendar. And we're trying to do more to kind of bring those two pieces together so that people can understand, what's available on a given day versus what resources just exist in the community in general that you may want to connect with for appointments or things of that nature. It is a lot of work maintaining and getting that information. Organizations change hours and requirements and availability all the time. And I will also drop in there that we're also mentally preparing for how willing are organizations going to be to advertise that information in the future, for fear of who might use it, to come out when distributions are happening. So just, just some thoughts there. I will say too that we have organizations that voluntarily submit that data. We then also have ones that are required to because they are receiving county funding. And I think that is also a really important distinction, because when you're putting that data out there and you're sending people somewhere to get services, there really should be some reason, encouraging them and not overwhelming, the resources that are available from any one partner.
Hey, Marie, that's a very good point. I was just on a meeting this morning where they were talking about citizens that are not citizens of the US.
Yeah.
I hate to call them the other word, but they were saying that they were using MVA documentation because they were able to get licensed and going into the school system and using that information too. So I think as we move forward, that's definitely something we have to think about. Summer.
Hi. So first, I'll admit that I definitely have less knowledge on the existing maps than many of the other people on this call. But one thought, just kind of from the outside looking in, for folks that might help kind of revise or kind of tune up this recommendation, is it might be helpful to include maybe some like key use cases where you think that combining this data would lead to better outcomes. Because I think, talking about it in abstract might make it a little bit hard for folks to connect with it when they're reading the recommendation. So if there are some really specific use cases of how you could see like combining data sets that already exist could lead to really, specific outcomes or decisions, that might help bring it to life. I also really liked where I think Nancy, you said this, apologies if it was someone else, the suggestion around thinking through almost like contingency plans or other ways of accessing resources, whether it's through, working with students that could help with combining some of these data sets as part of a project they're doing or something like that. I think that would be a good one to think through too, if this ends up being something where you think there would be an investment of resources needed, but you want to have kind of a backup plan in the event that it does not receive any budget allocation.
Summer and Nancy, I think it was Nancy that talked about the students. I think that's an excellent suggestion, but the one thing that comes to mind when I was doing resource books is commitment. Students come in and then they go. Students come in and then they go. Meg.
Yeah, thanks, Diana. I mean, I was going to say, I think Summer, that the use case idea is really good. I think we did a decent job of that in the recommendations last year. We talked about all the maps that are already out there. There are plenty of them. There's already resources being spent to clean the data, create the maps, update the maps. And a lot of times, if you don't have resources, whether it's human or financial, what happens is your map becomes useless because the data is so old. So my recommendation, and the fiscal ask on this one was pretty modest, if I remember correctly. I think it was $300,000, and I think that was a 2-year number. In my professional opinion, and I've spent a lot of time building maps, not myself, but working with people who build maps here and other places. If it's not resourced, it won't happen. It'll happen way too slowly, and it won't be good. That's the thing. Anybody can create an ArcGIS map. That's not hard. To make one that's got reliable information in it is it's a much different exercise. So I like the idea of taking another look at this. I would not be comfortable taking it down in terms of professionalism, because I think the number is actually too low. If anything, I think Maryland deserves a world-class food access map, and that costs money. So, but I do like the idea of kind of freshening it up, and I think the use case idea is absolutely genius. It illustrates why this would be so useful, which we didn't quite tease that out last time. So a few connected thoughts there from me.
I think if I can just bring it back, I know I said it previously, but I do think we have to be very careful when we're putting distribution sites where everyone can see, because we are in a new climate. So we really need to be careful when we are moving forward on that. But Meg, I
You know,
agree.
Diana, that just gave me an idea. Maybe one of the refreshes on this is it's because actually the legislation specifically calls out, or we wrote that in at some point, a food finder. So maybe we focus on a food insecure. Not sure what it would be called, but we like the drivers of food insecurity, right? All the reasons that people are food insecure. That's what we visualize first, and we just move this idea of the distribution sites off to the side for a little bit. Because I think you're right. Until it would take time anyway. We couldn't do it all at once. But that in and of itself, just visualizing where food insecurity exists and the drivers of that is a huge value add. So we could just focus on that.
Holly, I'm seeing you in the chat. I was just about to put the link to the Howard County Food Finder from the Howard County LHIC. Do you know about that one, Allie?
I don't. I know a couple. Like Garrett County has a really good food website that connects. Like, it tells you like where to go. I know a couple other counties. I'm personally working on a grant for 5 specific counties that we had previously funded to really focus on food policy councils. And some of the work within that would be expanding knowledge about where to go. But I do know at the Department of Health, I'm sure everyone faces this, like there's so many data gaps and we don't have a lot of epidemiologists to kind of like help us with that. So we're really relying on the local health departments to gather this data. I know one of the managed care organizations is doing a big grant project with, I don't remember what county, but they actually have like this social determinants of health map that you guys are kind of presenting. So that obviously would cost money to kind of engage with them, but it is something that's already kind of being out there. So I'm hoping at some point it'll be shared once they really get it off the ground so that we can utilize the data elsewhere. But continuing to collect that data all across the counties is really kind of where we're focusing by working with the local health departments and the local health inclusion coalitions.
All right. Any other thoughts? Thank you, Allie. Are there other thoughts on the map before we go to the next one? Sounds like there's definitely interest in forming a work group around the map. Okay. The next one was cold storage. So this was one that Distribution and Access collaborated with Environment and Production on, about cold storage facilities across Maryland to increase food aggregation and enhance distribution capacities and reduce food loss. Are there any thoughts specifically on how Distribution and Access would be interested in revisiting this recommendation? I actually don't think this is one that Environment and Production, at least from the initial work group pitch, I don't think we received any enthusiasm about revisiting this. Except Mike, who has left the meeting, but he had a good point about year-round food preservation. Nancy,
And I would like to see what Heather would like to say in regards to this.
Well, the only thing I was going to say about environment and production, I think you're right that the particular recommendation, but I think there is interest in looking at it from the infrastructure recommendation. So I think there is still interest in cold storage. It's just where does it live and how is it looked at? Go ahead, Heather.
Thanks, Diana. Sorry, it's been a little
No
loud. I
problem.
didn't mean to keep typing at y'all the whole meeting. Yes, so you're probably referring to like community fridges, and like I think this is a very important aspect of what we do moving forward, and almost like a broken record, it's what I hear from all kinds of stakeholders, whether they be food distribution people, whether they be farmers, whether it be community groups that want to have a community fridge. It's a never-ending shortfall of people trying to get food access into their communities. So I think cold storage is still really important because it's a huge financial barrier for people. So I would hate to see this go away as a priority.
Thank you, Heather.
I think I saw somebody from the Montgomery County Office of Food Systems Resilience on the call. Catherine, are you able to speak to this? I know that you have implemented a cold storage program in Montgomery County. She's still on the call. Maybe not. Beth, were you going to say something?
I was. This is super important, right? I mean, this is kind of what we need for food access, right? We talk about food resiliency. I mean, that's what we're doing is food resiliency, and this is imperative that we are able to store our food and be able to distribute it out, right? So I think this has to be like one of the number one things that we're focused on is what does the infrastructure look like, right, Nancy? Is it housed? I've talked about this like for 5 years is, we need 4 aggregation centers in the state of Maryland that are pulling from our farmers and to help grow more than 4% of our table crops from our farmers. Like we need to make it easier for them to be able to. So I think cold storage is really very, very important. So.
And Beth, I also think about it also from food waste. A lot of food is going to waste just because we don't have storage to store it in.
I will agree with that, and I think right, and connecting with restaurants, let them know that Nancy, what's the legislation for that people can donate food and be held harmless? Do you know the name of it? Does anybody? Because I can't think of it right now.
So,
I can see the commercial, but
it's a Good Samaritan.
I think
it's like the George Emerson or Bill Emerson or
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
Like I think that's where we need to be educating people too, is that like restaurants can donate their food, but where do they donate it to? How do we, right. So we just have disconnects. I think mapping is important, but let's be quite honest, we all know in our counties who's doing what. Like really, we could just ask key people in each county is where are your holes? I don't know if we need a map anymore. And May could probably tell you every county of where the holes are. Let's start, I don't know. I just feel like we talk and we just need to really start seeing action and putting things into place. We know there's an issue. If the pandemic didn't show us that, I don't know what will. But how do we make people understand how important these cold storage, aggregation, preserving our food, growing table crops in case it happens again? When I first started with this council, in my head, it was if the state of Maryland survived and everybody else went away, would we be able to survive in our our state? And the answer is no, we couldn't. I mean, we don't have the food resources that we need. I mean, there's still a supply chain issue after all this time. I mean, I'm still having trouble getting, some food. I know, Meg, I know a food bank is struggles. I mean, they used to have 20 pages of food. They had 3, 2 weeks ago because it's food isn't available. How do we, like, really, let's get back to the nuts and bolts of this, of how do we
make a
food.
difference. Yeah.
And how do we get better food, and how do we get cleaner food, on to our people? If I would say anything, I would say we need to have aggregation, cold storage areas. I would like for everybody to get a Maryland Department of Transportation bus to get the food out to the food desert areas, and that people could come in and use their SNAP, and they could use, RX scripts from, the health departments or from their doctors. We had that program here with Chop Tank Health, and it was very successful. Really, let's teach people where their food comes from. I mean, it goes back to the University of Maryland Extension does a great job. How do we utilize them more to be able to educate? So anyway, I'm off my soapbox. Okay.
Beth, I like everything you said. And also, I just want to add, we need to get Maryland market money out there more too. Allie, I see you've had your hand up for a while.
I was just gonna actually add to that / echo a lot of what you were saying as well. We and my department at the Department of Health, we are focusing a lot on these issues, and one project is Farmers EBT, expanding EBT access at farmers markets and farm stands, CSA connections for SNAP eligible. But like you said, a big issue is the transportation. I know Allegheny is about to lose one of their bus systems, and they don't have any way for a lot of these people to get around. So I think that if you're looking at what is reasonable ask right now, I think asking to establish these facilities is great, but with our current financial climate, it's definitely not going to happen in the next couple of years. But really laying that groundwork to start getting to that opportunity to implement these things, I think, it really does focus on the data piece, really making that picture well known. So if there's a way we can kind of, like people have mentioned, like find a way to compile this data into one area, or maybe something that we recommend is like one of the departments for the state, I mean, it could be any agency, collects this type of data on social determinants of health or transportation access or whatever, instead of all of us being in different silos. And I think that's something we have been working on at the agencies, but at the same time, there's still so much information that we're not sharing with each other. So I don't know. I guess my biggest thing is like, it's out there, but how do we get the information together? And I think that could be a recommendation in a way of like really being able to get these other recommendations off the ground, is having one central depository for this information, whether it be an epidemiology department or just like a general data department with some agency. I think that would be awesome.
And
Anne-Marie? Yeah,
go ahead.
I was just wondering if anyone has ever been in touch with Amanda Brondy from the Global Cold Chain Foundation. She had reached out to me a while back about an app that they were looking to start about available cold storage in different areas, where there might be space that providers could use, and, on a short-term basis to store things. And I have to be honest, I just really didn't have the capacity to do much else in that area. And it also just sounded like it was really kicking off. But just wanted to mention that here in terms of storage, acknowledging storage that's already out there and maybe opportunities to just better utilize it as opposed to, is more storage necessary, or is just more access to the storage that's available necessary?
What is that organization called, Anne
Right.
Marie?
It's, I'm putting the name and their name and her name in the chat.
Thank you.
Mhm. She was very helpful. I met with her a couple of times. It was a lot of information to take in, but they were also interested, they are a group that pulls together the folks who own the cold storage. And so there are also opportunities for them to encourage food businesses that have food to donate that is currently sitting in their space to donate that produce. So it's just a little intricate piece of the food chain that, like, they're not the ones who own the produce product, but because it's in their space, and if it's been like turned away by the end customer, instead of kind of moving it back, they can encourage the provider to donate it. But then there was, like I said, also this element of actual use of the cold storage space.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And thanks to both you and Heather for putting that information in the chat too. For the sake of time, I'm going to keep us moving to the food councils, and then we're going to talk about how to get you established in work groups. I'll also be following up, since I know we lost a number of people on the call already. So the last one was expanding the impact of existing food councils. This one was for funding part-time staff members to coordinate local food councils. This is the 2024 recommendation. Are there thoughts on other strategies for expanding capacity for local food councils?
No, I think this one is very important, and I agree with Bev in regards to making a difference and really prioritizing what we're doing to make sure that we're really addressing the issue.
Is there a different strategy to get traction with this? If it seems like, this was the second time this recommendation was put forth? Is that right, Diana?
Yes.
For staffing?
Yes.
It makes me think of what Beth was saying about how every local jurisdiction knows their own landscape, or like has that like community network. And I wonder if there's like something that's like project focused that for this strategy to help like justify funding in a different way, or funding for staffing in a different way. Any other ideas for this one?
Maybe, Annie, go ahead. Maybe it's we put it in a work group and see if they come up with any new thoughts.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going too, because I think going back to Summer's idea, we could put more use case into the language. We could think about lowering either the amount, I wouldn't lower the amount, but maybe somehow get the number down so it seems a little different. Maybe it seems a little achievable. Maybe there's more of a collab with county governments or something like that. Yeah, I do think rethinking this so we're not just presenting the same thing for a third time, because obviously it's not resonating.
And I kind of wish, like, Montgomery County gets it. I mean,
yeah,
they get it. I have
unique.
nothing else to say. They're very, very unique.
Yeah.
I wish our county or other jurisdictions would get it too.
Well, look, I know that Teresa mentioned at the start, our unfortunate, staff cuts, and no longer having Michelle Caruso on to speak about her work in that area that she was doing through the USDA grant. And I know that there's also been a lot of turnover at the Prince George's County Food Equity Council, so kind of losing resources there to talk about that work. But I'm certainly happy to bring this up with our executive director in terms of like any final reports, that may have been submitted to USDA, if there's information from there that we can share about just what work, occurred under that grant.
Okay, so I have the recommendations work group form. There's a QR code here. I'm gonna send an email to everybody who could or could not make it to this meeting to prompt them to fill this out too. We are really trying to get folks from the committees to take the initiative and work with each other outside of these committee meetings because it's too difficult to workshop these things with like a larger group. So we hope that you will fill it out and really want to highlight that it's not just for council members or FSRC or committee members, it's for everybody. And if there are people who you feel like should be looped into this conversation, please feel free to let us know and we can reach out to them. Diana, were you going to say something?
Exactly what you just said. Please send it out to your network because we want as many people on here that can have a good input to address these issues.
Guys, don't look at the link I sent you in the chat. I am off my chat game today. I'll put the actual link in. Sorry.
You just have to do them all twice. You get it the second time.
Here it is.
And you're allowed mistakes. It's okay.
Exactly.
Okay. So any other updates from anybody? Any last things that people want to talk about? No? Okay. Well, I will reach out to everyone with, again, the form. I'll send a summary of the things that were talked about today, as well as the resources that were shared in the chat. So stay tuned and please feel free to reach out if you have any additional thoughts in the meantime.
And Annika, can I just say, since we're getting off a few minutes early, if you could fill out the worksheet right now, because what will happen if you like me, you'll forget and you won't fill it out. So we have a few extra minutes. Please fill it out and send it out to your network if you think anyone else would want to participate. And I just want to thank everyone for joining us today.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Diana. Take care, everybody.